Hi friends, this is your friend Navneet from Divinity World. Before I introduce you to today's topic, uh, let me just give a background into it, maybe about it. Uh, Friends, when we care about nature, our environment, our bodies, it gives back to us with some benefits like clean air, clean water, or maybe a good immune system. But when we try to play around with nature, it has its own ways of resistance. And when we cross all the limits of exploiting the nature artificially in our labs, it has its own mechanisms of taking revenge. And in some rare instances, it, it, it takes revenge not to one particular person or a group of people, a region or a country, but sometimes it takes revenge from the entire world. Holding this model of Earth in my hand, which is a globe, let me introduce you to today's topic, my dear friends, which is COVID-19. बहुत सुना होगा आपने. I think there has not been a single day since this was being identified when the news channels have not been talking about coronavirus. So my dear friends, this video is about coronavirus, but we'll not be getting into the facts and figures, but this video is about clearing the concepts about coronavirus with respect to the various terms. Now, it would be very naive out of me to tell you comprehensively about coronavirus, because the world is still discovering, right? World is still exploring it. Forget vaccine. We almost know, the virologists around the world are still finding that there are various mutations to it. So this short video is about clearing concepts on those terms which are being frequently used. And I'll straight away start with the word epidemic. The meaning of word epidemic is when a disease or an illness, right, has reached beyond the expected stage. Its intensity has crossed that expected stage. It is called an epidemic. So for example, dengue in India, it's an epidemic related to one particular geographical area or a region like India, for example. And when a disease or illness is called pandemic, if you want to understand what is pandemic, just separate this word into two. Pan, epidemic. So when the epidemic crosses the borders and goes into various other countries, across continents, when it spreads across the entire world, it is called pandemic that the world is currently facing in the form of COVID-19. So friend, COVID-19 is a short form of coronavirus 2019. It was identified, the first case was being identified in the later part of year 2019. World Health Organization or WHO has specifically named it COVID-19 and not assigning any geographical name to it, like earlier was being done with Spanish flu, which was later discovered that the origin of Spanish flu in the year 2018 was not Spain at all, but a stigma got attached to it and people till now remember it as Spanish flu. But the real fact is that the origin of Spanish flu was not in Spain. So having said that, I should say to and convey to you that the COVID-19 was developed artificially in one of the labs in Wuhan province of China. So let's begin. Comorbidities. A comorbidity, the meaning of comorbidity, if I just tell you in a very simple term, is that if an infected person, a person who got an infection of coronavirus, if his immune system is already being compromised because of some huge level of diabetes or maybe a lung infection, can be a cancer, then it aids into the fatality of the virus. So that is called comorbidity, right? Community transmission. Friends, when you are no longer able to identify the source of the infection, it is called community transmission, right? Usually when the transmission of the virus starts, we are able to identify that this person might have visited that particular place in which there have already been people who have been infected. So we are able to trace, right? But when we say that particular region or a country has gone into a community transmission, that means you have actually not been doing those things, like visiting or though, but you've still caught up with the infection, right? So you might have not visited the place which was contaminated by the virus or the infection, but you have still got it, right? So that is called community transmission, wherein you are no longer able to determine the origin. What is contact tracing? A contact tracing is trying to identify those people who have came in contact with a particular infected person or a group of individuals who were already been infected. So trying to identify them, reach out to them and tell them to go for either self-isolation or quarantine. Now, quarantine means applying social distancing and going into isolation even with the family members around, even from your family members, right? That is quarantine. What are super spreaders? Now, super spreader is a person who is a highly infected and who has a capability and a capacity to infect a huge number of people. That is called a super spreader. It can be one person or it could be a group of individuals. Positivity rate. Plainly speaking, the percentage of people who have been identified of carrying this virus amongst the total number of people which have been tested. Now, there are various implications of being a high positivity rate and a low positivity rate. A high positivity rate means when we say there is a very high positivity rate, the implication could be a very less number of tests have been conducted with respect to the testing is only going on for the infected people, right? Or the people who are showing symptoms. हम सिर्फ उन्हीं का टेस्ट कर रहे हैं तो वहां पे पॉजिटिविटी रेट हाई आएगा, राइट? इसका ये implication हो सकता है. A low positivity rate means that there is not enough testing going around. So initially in India per se, when we said that पॉजिटिविटी रेट बहुत कम है, सो उसका इम्प्लीकेशन ये था कि देयर वाज नॉट इनफ टेस्टिंग गोइंग अराउंड एंड दैट वाज द राइट पिक्चर, राइट? Today when I'm talking in the month of September, when there is a lot of 10 lakh tests are being done or 1 million tests are being done on daily basis, now the cases are getting arisen, right? Antibodies test. So antibodies test is basically to find out the antibodies in your system, and if the antibodies are being found, it actually implies that you might have came in contact with this virus, right? Cytokine storm. This is a very important term, my dear friends. Cytokine storm. A cytokine storm is basically body's immune reaction, right? Reaction of our immune system to the coronavirus. Now, because of this reaction to the immune system, which is usually the proteins in the blood vessels, they come into action. The hyperactivity of them may lead to high temperatures, right? It might lead to hypoxia, right? Your blood vessels might dilate, and it can lead to faster heartbeats, high temperature, can lead to organ failure, and eventually death. So, usually the experts and the virologists around the world, they are of a view that it's actually not the virus that kills the person, but it's actually the cytokine storm activity on that person which actually kills it. Very important. Screening. Now, screening is not the testing. Screening is just checking about those symptoms in you. So, for example, you must have seen nowadays, if you are visiting a nearby shop or maybe a mart or maybe a mall, you've seen the guard, putting that handheld thermometer around you and checking for the any rise in temperature or so. So if you've been found to be if your temperature is found to be high, you could be the next candidate for the coronavirus testing. So that is the screening. Plasma therapy. So utilizing the blood plasma of a person who has been infected and recovered for the treatment of other infected people, that is called plasma therapy or convalescent plasma therapy. Then comes the herd immunity, a very common term. A herd immunity can also be called a community immunity. That means slowly and steadily the population has developed immunity towards virus through various infection, or now they have actually recovered from the virus, and now their immunity is actually fighting and supporting other people around. Now this is very much possible in small nations, and we can, people have started giving examples of Denmark, Finland, Sweden, so the Scandinavian countries, European countries. Now these are the countries which have a lesser number of population, right? So it's very much possible there. But for a huge system of population like in India or a China or maybe a USA, it is actually not possible, right? Asymptomatic, a very common term, asymptomatic. What is an asymptomatic person? An asymptomatic person, you may say, foolishly say that this person is a very healthy or maybe kind of person, isko kuch nahi hoga. But an asymptomatic person might be carrying the virus. Yes, my dear friends, an asymptomatic person might be carrying the virus. It's just that that person is not showing the symptoms of virus, right? He or she is fully capable of being a super spreader and contagious. It can transmit the virus to the other people around, despite not showing any symptoms of it. Hence, we advise everyone to wear masks and practice social distancing norms always. You never know when you'll come in contact with a person who is not showing any symptoms at all but might transmit the virus to you. Very important. Formite. A formite is any object. It can be a doorknob, it can be a door handle, it can be a usual dish, that can be contaminated and through which the transmission can take place, right? That is called a formite. Incubation period. The incubation period is the time taken by the virus, the coronavirus, to show its symptoms. It ranges from 2 days to even 14 days. So that is an incubation, meaning of an incubation period of a coronavirus. PPE is a personal protection equipment. It is those set of masks, screens, the entire clothing gear that a typical health worker, a medical practitioner wears when that person treats a COVID-19 patient. RT-PCR. RT-PCR is basically the test which gives a correct result with respect to whether you are carrying the coronavirus or not. It takes samples, or the swab samples that we call it, from your nasal or maybe cavity or maybe your oral cavity. आपके throat से या आपके नाक से samples निकाले जाएंगे, उनको टेस्ट किया जाएगा, तो उसका जो रिजल्ट आता है, that is the correct way of testing coronavirus around the world. Hydroxychloroquine or HCQ. So hydroxychloroquine is basically an anti-malarial drug whose derivative is usually being assumed to treat the coronavirus. Now its efficacy, its effectiveness is still not being verified, but it was initially being used, recommended by medical practitioners to treat the patients around. So the last thing is the flattening the curve. So flattening the curve means to arrest the spread of coronavirus through the various means like lockdowns that we have all faced, this various stages of lockdown. This is basically being done because there is a level at which the health infrastructure of a country or a region is, has some capacity. It cannot go beyond that. So to ensure that not many cases arise, the government or the authorities, they take those kind of measures to ensure that the transmission को break लगे. There has to be some breaks on the transmission of this, and hence we see because of these measures the curve usually does not go for a spike. So it can become a kind of a gentle hill or can be a plateau. So when this thing is being done, it is called flattening of the curve. So arresting the spread of the disease with of higher proportion is basically called flattening the curve. So my dear friends, this was a video on coronavirus. I hope you gained something out of it. In case you need some more clarification, you can write it to me on my YouTube channel. A very happy and a healthy life to you all, and be safe and don't be a COVIDiot. Again, a COVIDiot is usually a term being given to a person who does not practices the social norms. What is social distancing? So a level higher than a usual interaction with someone is called social distancing, and staying at least 6 feet away from the person when you are interacting with that person is just one of the examples of following the social distancing is concerned. Need to wear masks that the World Health Organization and the Indian Council of Medical Research that recommends always. So have a safe life. All the very best to you all. Thank you.